Recorded live on the turf at Mad Lab Training Studio in Eldersburg, Maryland. This is the Time to Win podcast with Alex and Dan. Now let's get this podcast started.
So Dan, here we are. I guess it's time to win, so I'm going to go ahead and crack open a Jocko because it's time to win. And Jocko, hey man, if you're out there listening right now, love to have you come on the podcast. I understand you cut a deal with Chris Pratt. Okay, good luck with that. That's all I can say. Pratt has never been on the podcast,
but he wants to be, I hear.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and dose up here on a little Jocko. And
I already had mine while I was training earlier.
Smart move, Dan.
My group got the whole caffeine shock in the middle of it.
Okay, so Dan, I came in and like I always do, I front-loaded you with a question.
You did.
On Tuesday, and I didn't tell you what the question is because you never want to know. You like to come in cold.
I do.
And run with it. But I also hit you with a comment this morning. Like, the one guy I don't want on the podcast is David Goggins. Right?
That's a hot take, yeah.
Like, really? And so here's my hot take on Goggins, right? Like, first of all, respect to the dude, okay, right? Because, like, I could do what he does, but I don't want to. Okay,
that's fair.
And you know he would, and that would be Goggins' message, right? Like, you could do what I do, right, if you wanted to, because you've got it in you, and I believe that. I believe his message, right? But I'm like, okay, Goggins, great. You know, you got up at 2:00 this morning, you ran 25 miles to work, you worked 27 hours, and then you ran 50 miles back home, right? Good job. I could do that, right? But like, what else do you do? Right? Do you have another message out there? Because I got that message loud and clear. What's next, right? Like with Jocko, you know, like he goes on his podcast, or you know, with any of the guys, even with us, right? Even a couple of rank amateurs like us, right? You know, we go in a lot of different directions. We got a lot of different messaging. But I look at Goggins, and you know, yeah, he's inspirational. But it's like, okay, I got that message once. What's the next message, right? Like I can go hard.
But doesn't he also go into a lot of stuff with not only like I can go hard, because that's what everybody thinks of him as like the hardest dude on the planet, right?
Yeah.
But then doesn't he go into leadership and all sorts of stuff like that? And then doesn't he also talk to people with a traumatic past? Because he's had a lot of trauma in his young life.
Yeah.
And I think he goes into that in kind of a therapeutic way as well. So I think a lot of people that have issues like that, it resonates with as well. Yeah. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I don't know, right? So I got tired of listening to Goggins, and so I don't listen to him anymore. And maybe he's evolved the message. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
You know, if somebody I trust as much as I trust you says, hey, think it through a little bit, Alex. Okay, I'll think it through. Okay.
That's fair.
So maybe you're right. But that's not the question. I haven't even asked you the question that I wanted to ask.
I had another take on it, but continue.
Yeah, okay. So do you want to keep going with Goggins, or do you want to...
Well, one of the things that does kind of drive me a little, only because of the way that we do things here, right, is that he has some fairly tremendous knee issues that he just battles through. And I love the fact that he's so great at battling through adversity and like pain, any kind of wall that's put up in front of him, like he's going through it.
Right.
But I feel like some of those things, and this is me saying this, and this is, so I don't always listen to this, my own advice on this, but I think sometimes it's not always, like I think that you get lessons from going through a wall, right? So going through the hard path. I think there's a lot of merit to that, right? I think that mental toughness is a huge thing in humanity, and that's one of the things that makes us be able to do a lot of things that we're able to do. And then if that's lacking, it also causes a lot of issues. However, I think that it's not always the best idea at the time. And I think that with his knees, I feel like he could do some other things. And then sometimes the message is like, oh, you're in pain, just power through it. But that will ruin your body fast.
Yeah.
And like you can only power through so much before your body's going to be like, no, you can't do this.
Right. So situational awareness is everything, right? Like, is the pain between my ears, or is the pain really in my knee, right? Am I hurt, or am I just weak? Right. And that's not the question I wanted to ask, right? But it's a great question to ask, right? And it may actually tie in with the question that I'm about to ask you, and see if you can like knit all this stuff together. Okay.
Do you want to know my answer first, or do you want to
but-
ask the question?
Yeah.
first?
Okay. So for our listening audience, like every week I tease Dan, like beginning
All
about
the time.
about Tuesday, right? And I say, okay, Dan, like I got a zinger for Friday, and you always say, don't tell me, right?
Because
But
I do want to come in fresh, but I will tell you it's very tough for me. Because one of my idols, who I think is just an amazing character all around, Curious George. So I fashioned a part of my life from Curious George, and I'm naturally curious.
Yeah.
Some would say curiosity killed the cat, Alex, but I say it made the monkey famous. And it's tough for me to go. It's tough for me to go a whole week with these things.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy it once it's here. So how do we present this?
Okay.
Like, is there fanfare? Is there music?
Yeah,
What's happening? here?
No, it's going to be totally anticlimactic, right? I'm just,
I love
gonna, I'm, but I got a couple lead-ins, right? Like,
Okay.
So, like, what's your favorite song?
My favorite song.
Yeah.
Of all time right now.
And time's up, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Too late. You didn't answer the question, right?
I don't think I could.
Because it's hard. Okay. What's your favorite food?
Probably ribs or Thai curry.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
I love Thai curry.
Okay, so you gave me two answers, right?
Son of a. I'm not doing very well, Mike.
No. I'm setting you up though, right?
It sounds like
Okay.
it. It feels like it.
Okay. So here's the question. Now before I ask it, did you answer it already? Curious George?
I answered it.
Yeah, that was the answer, Curious George.
Curious George.
Okay. Here's the question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best advice that you ever got in your life?
The best advice I ever got in my life. Whew.
Okay. And the reason I did those weird lead-ins was that it's really hard to pick one, right?
For sure.
Right? And it's in fact I'd go ahead and say it's like for me it's impossible to pick one, but I have one in mind that I'm going to share with you today. But
Yeah,
like,
please.
If you said, what's your favorite food? I'd say, well, today it's peanut butter and jelly, right? Tomorrow it's going to be ribs and Thai. The next day it's going to be spaghetti and meatballs, okay?
And
But-
what is your favorite food throughout history? Like if somebody had to look at like a graph of it and like how often
No
that
way.
you.
I'm not even going to answer that because for me it changes every day. Right?
Is
Like,
there any of them that have hit multiple times on a day?
No.
It's been different every day of your life.
Almost every day.
Like the
I mean,
music choices. I believe that just because of the music choices.
Right.
I wouldn't normally believe that in somebody, Mike, but I
So-
do with Alex.
So like my wife, she loves to listen to classic rock, right? So she goes to that classic rock station and there's 100 songs on the playlist.
Right.
And it's, they're all great songs, but they were really awesome to listen to like the first 10,000 times you heard them. But I'm tired of that. And that's what happens with me. I get
So you're a
tired
big
of
new experience guy.
I am. Yeah, big time. And I'll tell you the best advice I ever got, and then we can talk about it. But if you ask me again tomorrow, it'll probably change. Okay.
All right.
All right. So that's me with food, music.
Fair
The
enough.
one thing that is consistent is Brenda. Okay, my wife. All right? Like
Good answer.
Like, I
Good
never
answer.
get tired of her. Okay.
Smart guy.
Yeah. So what's the best advice you ever got, Dan?
I'm gonna have to think about that
Yeah.
for me because there is a lot. That's gonna take me some refresh, but I will answer that today.
Okay. You want me to just to like?
I would love for you to answer your
Okay.
best advice. ever.
Okay, so the one that I set up with today, right, is take 2 seconds. Okay, that's great advice. Okay, and I'll give you a couple of examples. But the way I thought about this when I got that advice, when somebody told me just take 2 seconds before you do that, okay, and think about it. Make sure that you know that your intentions are correct and that you understand the outcomes, and that you've had a second to like just reality check everything.
That's
okay?
probably very good advice.
All right. It was super advice, gold. Okay, because the launch nukes button is right next to the make coffee button, right? And
I've
so
heard you say that before.
like make sure before you punch that button, make sure that you're pushing the make coffee button.
Yeah. Do you
and
need
not starting?
Do you just need a little wake me up, or do you need to destroy humanity?
Right.
Yeah.
So that was good
Question I
advice.
ask myself every day.
I know, right? Like before I take that next shot, take 2 seconds. Do I need this next shot? Or before I throw that punch, or before I pick that thing up, or before I hit send on an email, take 2 seconds and just ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? Right? And I think that that's going to save people a lot. It certainly has saved me a lot of anguish, right?
Yeah.
And I think about the things that I regret in my life are usually things that were done in haste, right? Done in the passion of the moment, right? And to take 2 seconds, believe me, Dan, it doesn't take 2 seconds of passion off the clock. It takes like 10 minutes of passion off the clock by waiting 2 seconds, taking a deep breath. But you don't waste any time with it either, right? Like 2 seconds is like really, it's not much to invest.
No, it's not.
In avoiding World War III, for example.
It doesn't
right?
even make a conversation awkward. Like a 10-second count
Yeah,
would be a little
yeah.
would be a little awkward.
Yeah.
Because I've heard that advice before, like count to 10 before you do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think guys like us, we can get
We
by
can do
with
it too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, overachievers.
Sounds like,
right?
it's something I would try to
Yeah.
do. Oh, I can do it in 2 seconds. Yeah. I would say that I think that's a great piece of advice because I feel like a lot of issues that people have in life come from just reactivity and just from an emotional moment, right? And then there's a lot of regret afterwards.
Yeah.
And then some of those things that are said or done can't really be undone or are really difficult to be undone.
Right.
And then what you did just like all happened in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Where if you would have taken 2 seconds, you could have avoided a lot of regret,
Yeah.
a lot of issues with
Yeah.
other people and stuff.
Yeah, totally my point, Dan, right? Like once you launch the nukes, you can't rewind that, man. They're gone, right?
Yeah.
And you're not bringing them home. Right?
Yeah, you're not bringing them home because they've already blown up.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can unsend an email, right? But
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, but
You're not kidding though, because I actually have had a couple instances of that, even fairly recently.
Yeah.
Because things will happen, especially like when dealing with this space and like all sorts of stuff. Sometimes people will do things, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that is completely idiotic," and I don't know why they do this. And my first instinct is to get on the phone with them and then scream at them. Mm-hmm. And then I have been better at that this past year, and I feel like it's borne fruit, which is great because there's a lot of things that we do now that I don't think with Mad Lab that I don't think that we would be able to do if I would have burned some of those bridges. While it might have been glorious at the time, I don't think it'd be very glorious now.
Hey, nuclear war makes great fireworks, but
That's actually, yes, true.
and by the way, listeners, I am not advocating at all. Okay, take 2 seconds, please, before you push the button, even if it's make coffee. Okay, 2 seconds.
2 seconds. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I would say one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got. So I have two of them. One of them was just to be weird and original, right? Because a lot of times I think that you want to follow whatever everybody else is doing, or like you want to be like within a societal norm.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of the times that I've stepped outside the norm is when I've created the best relationships with people, that I've had the most business success. I've also had the most fun as well. And at first, if you do that, I think that it's a little bit awkward and it's a little scary because it's outside of a comfort zone. But once you do that more, that you just accept that's who you are, and everybody around you accepts that, and then almost like your weirdness and your own personality becomes the expectation, and then everything becomes easier.
Right. Well, okay, so that's great advice, first of all. And one of my mentors gave me the same advice, okay, a guy named Tom Peters. And, the guy is like, he's kind of like, I don't think we could get him on the podcast. I don't think he'd do it. But, he's one of these guys that everything that comes out of his mouth is gold, right? And, he says things like, whoever tells the best story wins, right? And that has to be a true story. But I was
going to say, because I can fabricate some tales.
Yeah, I know, but I know you can't. But a lot of our work is storytelling. When we talk to people or when we try and persuade somebody to do something, we're doing a bit of storytelling, right? And so Tom said, among other things, whoever tells the best story wins, right? That was really good advice. But Tom also...
That's a lot of history is written.
Yeah. And history is written by the victors, Dan.
It is written by the victors.
Straight to the top,
Straight
baby.
to the top. For better or for worse,
So make sure you're a winner, right? Isn't that what Jocko would tell you? It pays to be a winner?
I would take it one step further, and I'd say make sure you listen to this podcast.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, that is very good advice. Or it's terrible advice. It's one of the two.
Okay.
I forget which one.
Okay, so here we are. We're 10 or 12 minutes into the podcast. I don't know. I'm not keeping track.
1450.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
But I'll come back to weirdos in a minute, right? But hey, I want to take a little sponsorship break real quick. All right. I want to endorse a product, right? So my good friend Mike Cusack runs a business called Cusack Print Communications. And if you need something put into a pamphlet or a trifold or a business card or something else that you're going to hand to a customer, Mike Cusack is the guy. He's backed up with a solid team of graphic artists and production people, and he's the guy that brings it home. So
we might got to use him for Mad Lab.
Yeah, I will. I'd love to. So
yeah,
let's start with that. Mike Cusack at Cusack Print Communications, right? And that's your go-to guy. So I promised him I'd shout out to him today at the podcast. So Mike, I don't know if you'll ever listen to this, but there you go.
Mike, you also might have a customer here because we do need people to do print. And it's hard to find good people like that.
Okay.
So we'll talk afterwards.
Okay, he's the best in the business.
Hell yeah.
40 plus years, and he knows his stuff. Okay.
I'd like to hear that for sure.
Right. You want to do any shout outs here?
Well, I always got
Adam.
I got to shout out Adam. Let me tell you something about Adam. So one, Adam owns CNA Auto right across the street from Mad Lab Performance. Everybody knows where Mad Lab Performance is. So obviously now you know where CNA Auto is. It's at the center of the universe. Pretty much the center of the universe, I would say. You have any kind of engine issues, even if you want to get some maintenance done, oil change, tire change, anything that you need done to your car, you should go to CNA Auto, and they will fix it. They'll figure it out for you. They're honest. Their prices are great, and Adam is the man. Miss Kelly over there sometimes will drive your car over to you. The service there is impeccable. It's awesome. Also, we've talked about the 30-pound sledgehammer I have at home.
Oh, yeah.
Adam recently gave me a tire from his business, like some used tire, like a big tire. And then I brought it to my house, and I used it yesterday. Did 100 swings on each side, and that tire held up, and it was perfect. And it's better than driving that into the ground, especially when it's muddy, and just destroying the side of my tree line.
Yeah. Okay, so, and I'm sure the sledgehammer is looking good, too.
The sledgehammer is looking the way the sledgehammer should look. It's very muddy.
Okay, right. So I have a sledgehammer and like a 400-pound combine tire. I don't have a 30-pound. I have like a 20-pound.
Yeah, mine's not a 400-pound combine tire.
But I know that when I go out there and I swing the hammer, the sledge goes from rusty to shiny, like in about 100 strokes, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if that happens to you.
Mine's not rusty yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
It is covered in mud, so it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
It's a cool looking sledgehammer, though, because it's all black. It just looks like a weapon of war. You know, like something like some Norse god would have and swing around.
Yeah.
Maybe Thor in particular.
Yeah. Okay, so take 2 seconds before you swing that one and make sure it's not the war hammer, but it's the peace hammer.
The peace hammer.
Right. Okay, so
I don't know. I might need the war hammer.
So another mentor of mine, I've mentioned him before, Mark Twite. Mm-hmm. He had this operation called Jim Jones once, and Jim Jones, not like Kool-Aid Jim Jones, but kind of like Kool-Aid Jim Jones, right?
Okay.
GYM, Jim Jones, right? And anyway, Twite, like an incredible thinker.
What's Kool-Aid Jim Jones?
Am
I an idiot?
Yeah, no, you're not.
Appreciate
before
that.
Your
Nicest
time.
thing anybody's ever said to me.
But not the best advice. I'm sorry.
Maybe not the best advice.
Yeah. Jim Jones was a cult leader in Guyana.
Oh, he was the one with the Kool-Aid that everybody
Kool-Aid,
died, the suicidal.
yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
So it was a play
Jim
on
Jones.
words, right? Jim Jones.
I thought it was the guy that played the Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah, like no.
And I was very excited about that.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Kool-Aid Man. Okay, so Twite, great writer.
Is the Kool-Aid Man Macho Man?
No.
Are they the same guy?
Okay, another question for another time.
Another time. Continue.
Right. Okay, so, but Twite had this. He was talking about copyright infringement.
Okay.
And at the bottom of that little article that he wrote, it's been some years ago. I don't know if you can find it on the internet anymore, but it said peace, but not PEACE peace. It was a picture of a handgun and it said peace. PIECE or PEICE.
Little different connotation.
Yeah, right? So anyway, be careful The launch nukes button and the pick up your piece button is right next to the make piece button. Okay, so
That's too many buttons for me here, Alex.
there's only two.
I'm going to get in trouble.
There's only two buttons in life.
Take 2
Dan,
seconds.
Take 2 seconds because there's the right button and the wrong button. Okay, make sure you push the right button. Take 2 seconds. So getting back to weirdos, though.
Yes.
My one of my mentors, Tom Peters, he said,
I need a mentor.
You have so many mentors in your life. You already do. Like Adam is a mentor. All right. Wolf Dog is a mentor.
You're kind of a mentor, I'd say, Alex. Wolf Dog is a mentor.
I don't know.
She could be.
Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not, especially in her current groomed state.
But Tom Peters said, he's a business leader, right? He wrote a book some time ago called In Search of Excellence. Okay.
I think you told me about that.
Yeah, and so Tom says, hang out with weirdos. Okay, hang out with the people that don't fit in. Hang out with the people that come up with crazy ideas. Okay.
Create an aisle of misfit toys.
Yeah, so to speak, because in the end, the misfit toys were kind of heroes at the end of that movie.
True.
Right? But when you hang out with people that don't think like you think and don't do what you do, you're going to learn something, right? You may learn, I don't want to be like that, but you're going to learn something, right?
For sure.
And if you're just hanging out with people that talk like you and look like you and think like you and act like you, you're not going to learn anything, right? You're just going to do more of the same.
I'm just going to get in trouble. I can't hang out with a bunch of Dans.
Yeah.
That's not good for anybody.
Yeah, it's not good for anybody.
But I do agree with you. I think that's important. And I think that's why you should seek out diversity anyway. And that's why diversity is so important.
Right? Well, yeah, when we look at a problem through one set of eyes, we come up with one solution. When you get 10 sets of eyes on there, you've got 10 solutions. And you can distill that essence into a much better answer, right?
100%.
Like I know, Dan, when I go out and I try and make a decision, like an important decision in my life, when I do it alone, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to get it wrong. Okay,
I hear you there.
I mean, even if it's a 30% chance that I get it wrong, that's a life decision, and that's not great odds, right? But if I bring in somebody else, if I bring in like Brenda, and I say, hey, I'm thinking about this, she's going to talk truth to me, right? And if I bring in Dan, and I say, Dan, I'm thinking about this, and then Dan's going to give me a little different take on it.
Well, then you have a 31% chance of success. I might add a percentage.
If I'm already bringing 70% to the table, and Brenda's bringing another 20%. I'm up to 90. If you're bringing 10%, okay, great. I'm going to make. It's almost certain I'm going to make a good decision.
Fair enough.
And I think that was Tom Peters' point. So that was some more good advice that I was given.
That is great advice.
Yeah, hang out with weirdos. And let me tell you what, that has never let me down in my life. The only thing that has let me down is hanging out with people that are just like me. And you said it first, right? Oh, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, because then that's what happens, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the other piece of advice that I would pair with that, and the other one that I think is a great piece of advice is, and this is one that was really tough for me for a long time, but it kind of goes into, plays into being weird and not being afraid to be weird and then hanging out with weirdos and stuff, is that no matter what, you're always going to have detractors. Not everybody's going to like you. You're not going to please everybody.
Right.
They're not going to always agree with what you do. And those should just be core principles that are going to be true.
Right.
Because and it seems kind of common sense that that's the case, but in practice, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
When you have detractors and you have people that are saying, oh, Dan shouldn't have done this, or Alex shouldn't have done this, or I disagree with his life choices here and here, then that's tough to get over. Once you get used to it, it does get a lot better. But as long as you start thinking that way and expecting it, I feel like that helps so much more into the other pieces of advice that we just talked about.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. We make these decisions, and as soon as the detractor comes along and whispers in your ear, it stings a little bit to hear that feedback, like you're wrong. But it also, then you start thinking maybe he's right, or maybe she's right.
Right.
Okay. Maybe I am wrong. Right. And then self-doubt creeps in, and that's a terrible thing.
A terrible thing. Because
Yeah.
then all of your decisions are based on, will it make this group of people be upset? well, this group of people will be upset. And then a lot of times, you know what ends up happening is you don't really do anything at all because you're just so afraid to make a large decision in your life. And I think that holds a lot of people back.
You know, I wouldn't say this guy was a mentor, but he was the owner of a company I worked at one time, and we were chatting a little bit, and he said, the only bad decision is no decision, right? Like we can probably get it, like, we're not in a high-risk business here. If we make a bad decision, it might cost us a little bit of money, it might cost us some reputation, but that's probably it, right? But if you don't make a decision at all manner of bad things could start happening, right? So now when we start saying, okay, take 2 seconds, and when we say, bring a couple more people in and vet your decision with them, and then do it, right? Make the decision. Pretty much the world is going to be a better place.
I would agree with that, for sure. If you can keep an open mind and listen to others that are different than you, and then make a decision based on the result and not your own emotions, then I think that would make the world a much better place.
Yeah. Now, here's the rub, though. Here's the corollary. Like, sometimes they're going to say that's a bad decision, and they're going to be right. Okay.
True. Yeah.
And you have to have the I don't know. Is it humility?
Humility is part of it.
The good sense to listen. Right?
Yeah.
And to say, oh man, you're right. I never thought of it that way. You're right. That's a terrible decision. I'm not going to do it.
But you should be able to say that. And see, I think that's another expectation thing. I think that the more ideas that you have, the more you should be aware that a lot of your ideas are not going to be good ones, and you should be fine with that.
Yeah.
Right? And that should not be afraid to come up with ideas. Like I do it all the time here, and I'll come up with an idea, and I'll be like, hey, what do you guys think of this? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, this is great. How about we do it this way as well? And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, actually, Dan, did you think of this, and this? And I'll be like, nope, I didn't. Let's not do that then.
Right.
Yeah, because and I think that's the best way to go because it's the result that should matter, right? Not if it's your idea or somebody else's idea. And even if you go with somebody else's idea, you brought up the decision-making process, and at the end of the day, that you helped fuel that decision, even if it wasn't 100% what you were going to do in the first place.
Right.
And I think that should be lauded as well.
Yeah. So my son calls me up the other day, not Spencer, the other son.
Okay, the other son.
By the way, his name's Wes. If he ever listens to this podcast, I don't know. I think my kids, they would look at me on the podcast and say, that old man's an idiot.
They better start listening.
I don't know. But he says to me the other day, oh, man, Dad, this adulting thing is hard. And he's like 30, 32, right? Yeah, this adulting
He's right in the middle of adulting.
Yeah. Now I'd say he's in the early phase, right? Because, like I'm 60, and I feel like, I'm kind of like, I'm not going to live to 120. I'm probably past the middle, but yeah, I don't know, 50, 40.
Don't get me started on my argument.
Yeah, okay, I know. A different podcast or different episode.
Podcast.
Different
Fair
episode. Enough. But he says it's really, really hard. I'm like, yeah, it is. And he says, does it ever get easier? And I said, no, it actually doesn't get easier, but you care less. And that's the thing. You got to get over the hump. And then you don't care. You don't care about your detractors, right? Like you start getting some confidence in your ability to roll with life and to roll with that adulting thing. And you don't care so much. You don't care so much if somebody passes you in the fast lane and, they throw cigarette butts out the window or something. Just like, I'm not going to do anything about that.
Right. There's a percentage that's just going to be like that, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. I'm not going to change that. But I told him, it doesn't get easier.
So don't ram their vehicle.
Yeah, it doesn't get easier, but you care less. Okay, you don't care as much. Okay, so
I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I always it's a little strange to me though every time I think of when people say life is difficult or life is hard, because then my first thought is I'm always like, relative to what?
Right. Okay.
Because if something's gonna be difficult or hard, it has to be relative to something else. And then what are we relating it to? Death? Is death more? Is like death is a lot easier? Like the afterlife? I guess is super simple.
I've
apparently
got no experience in that area yet.
But I don't think many people do. And so then that's always interesting to me that people say that. And I'm like, do you mean like your life specifically? Or do you mean like life in general is difficult? And then again, you have to compare it to somebody else's.
Yeah. I take a little bit of exception to that though, right?
Okay.
Like Yeah, I mean, I've done some hard things, but looking back on it, I don't think of those things as being like, my memory of them is not that was hard. And some people wake up in the morning and they're struggling to get out of bed and they're like, "Oh, this is so hard." I'm like, "No, it's not. You just sit up and put your feet on the floor. That's not hard. Okay, maybe it hurts a little bit. Maybe you'd prefer to be asleep. Maybe it's cold in your bedroom, but it's not hard, right?"
So then maybe with some good advice, you would say, take things one step at a time.
Yeah.
And if something is difficult, that will pass.
Right. So Goggins was a SEAL. Jocko was a SEAL. Okay. And there's loads of other guys that are out there that are SEALs. And I think one of the things they would tell you is that if you're in buds, right, and you're thinking, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It is. It is the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. But the goal is not to get through buds right now. The goal is to take one more step or do one more push-up or get back in the boat and hit the surf. And when you cut it in a small enough slice, it's not hard, right? One step is not hard. 6 months of putting up with this bullshit, that's hard, right? So don't do it. Just do one step and then reevaluate, okay? And maybe that's some good advice.
That is some good advice. It's tough to do that, though, but I do think it's an excellent way to look at things. Because sometimes if you're going through something difficult, I think that is the way to look at it. Because if you look at it as a whole, there's many things that seem almost impossible. But if you do take it to this step and then this step, just like if you have a long-term goal for anything, whether it's a career goal or whatever it is, you want to take the short steps to get there. If you're trying to get to be able to do some kind of weight or some kind of exercise in the gym, then you want to take the smart, like, short progressions to get there, right? If somebody wants to do a backflip and they can't jump yet, well, they're not going to be like, jump, and then now that you can jump, now you do backflip, right? There's a bunch of things in between that they need to be able to do, and I think that's just like anything in life.
Right. I woke up one day and I said, I want to be a vice president and make a lot of money, okay? And so I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it took 25 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But all it really took was waking up every day, right?
Yeah.
Just wake up every day and go out there and do it, right? Don't think about like it's going to take 25 or 30 years.
Was that really was your goal at one point?
Actually, what I wanted to, when I look back on it, and I'm being honest with myself, my goal wasn't to be a vice president. My goal was to be the person that could go anywhere in the company and speak the language of the people that were working in that function, and to be useful and to be relevant and to be the kind of person that people would seek my opinion and they would act on my words or my advice, right?
Yeah.
And when I was young, I didn't realize what it took to do that. I just thought, oh, if you're a vice president, then you'll get those skills. You'll become that kind of a person. I think actually at one point I wanted to be like a chief operating officer. Maybe I even wanted to be a CEO until I learned what that person does for a living, and I was like, nope, I do not want that job.
So when you were thinking about these things, once you thought about like some of the stuff that you wanted to do, and then maybe as you go along it becomes more concrete, how did you get that to happen? Like, did you start talking about it to other people? Did you let
all the time?
See, I think that's really. We talked about that before.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and people, like some people would say, you're an idiot. You'll never do it because you don't have X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, that's great advice.
Detractors.
Not at all. No, I mean they thought they were.
Right.
But I was like, oh, you just gave me free consulting, right? I need X, Y, and Z on my resume. Now I'm going to go out and get them. And yeah, you can talk to Brenda that, like it must have driven her crazy because like every 3 or 4 years, I'd be like, I think that I'm not learning anything more in this function. I need to like, do a different thing or work for a different company or something because I'm not progressing, right? So I need to do something different to progress, right? And
that by itself, if you just take a little clip that out, that is a good piece of advice. I'm not progressing, so I need to do something else to progress.
Wow, did I just like...
You did. That's a really good piece of advice.
I just gave some advice. I wasn't even trying. Yeah.
See? Look, it just comes out liquid gold, Mikey. Yes, I think that's a great piece of advice, though. And I think that if more people did that and thought of things that way, then not only would the world be a better place, but also they'd be a lot happier, right? But people don't. They just keep going to day to day to day to day to day, and then all of a sudden they can't move anymore, and then their life is over, and then they haven't really accomplished anything.
Yeah.
And then there's a life full of regrets and all sorts of stuff.
Did you wait a second, Dan? Okay, did you just say then their life is over?
I might have said then their life is over.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Well,
but that's a different topic for another episode.
Other people, not me and you. We're immortal, as far as I know.
I hope not.
I don't know what I hope. I guess it depends on what happens when you die.
Yeah.
Right.
So
if it's just some inky blackness, then I want to live forever.
Yeah.
If it's something amazing and different, then I'll die tomorrow.
Okay. Right.
Maybe not. I got some stuff to do.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking a little bit about detractors and like.
Here comes the detractor right now.
Here comes
the spaceship.
The noise that you want to conform and you want to be accepted by people, and how that's generally rewarded. But I put it in a different context, right? Like, consider the president, okay? And it doesn't even matter which president, right? Because nobody loves. No, there's no president out there that everybody loves.
No,
right?
yeah, talking about detractors. That's a position that.
So consider that any given president, on their very best day in office, they might be getting 60% approval rating, right? I mean, that's a pretty good rating.
That's pretty good rating, yeah.
Right? And that means that if it's 60%, that means something like, I don't know. I'll make up a number. You guys can fact check me later. But let's just say that means 100 million people hate you. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe it's 50 million, but it doesn't matter because the number is so big. How do you live knowing that there's 50 million people that hate you and think you're doing an awful job, right? And
do you think that I think this is the case, but as you gain more, I don't know, as you move up. So it's a tough thing because we've talked about this a lot and like what does it mean to move up in society and like how people look at different things. But I would say as you gain more like maybe not notoriety, but like any kind of fame, whether it's in your like a small town or you start to be like a whole citywide or a whole statewide, or you start to get like in a country. I don't know if anybody can see Wolf Dog. She got groomed yesterday, so she looks a little alien and she's a little embarrassed right now. But
who painted her nails? That's awesome.
The groomer.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, I didn't know that she did that.
I always wondered what that dog looked like.
This is what she looks like.
She's
right, Wolf Dog, you're in all your grandeur.
Yeah, that's much better looking dog.
But I think that as you gain fame in whatever circles, that you start to get more detractors. And I think sometimes you should think that is a good thing. More people are now interested in your business enough to look at it and evaluate it, and then tell people that they don't like you or they don't like what you're doing, whatever. And that was another thing I had. I never had as many detractors as I do now before I was a business owner. Right? Once I became a business owner, and especially as things started to get bigger, then I found I had more and more detractors. And I think that's just the way that works.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said to me, are they jealous?
I think
there's a factor there.
I think that's a large part of it. Either that or bored.
Yeah.
One of the two. I don't know. Or a combination of that.
Yeah.
So I just don't spend a lot of time looking at somebody else's life and being like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Although I guess we do that. We kind of do that with like athletes and stuff. And like famous people. Right? You look at them because you want to have, at least in athletics, you want to have teams that you don't like and players that you don't like because it makes it easier to root for things. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So you do get involved in that. So maybe life's kind of the same way.
Right. Certainly athletics are that way, right? Like in the NFL, it's almost as much fun to hate a team as it is to love a team.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's fun.
It is.
I mean, I don't get it. It's such a bad thing to hate.
We got wild card weekend coming up. There's plenty of teams that I wish would move on. There's plenty of teams that I hope are never there again.
That's right.
That's right. And that makes it exciting. So with the advice that we've given out today, how does that play into society? Because we're building a society. Alex, how are we going to get a bunch of weirdos together? And then if we do get a bunch of weirdos together and we create a society, let's say we start with like 100 people, we got 100 weirdos.
Yeah.
Then now do some of them become normal? Because then are we like, is it relative to our community, or are we like saying relative to the outside world?
I don't know.
And how do we figure all that out?
I don't know.
I mean,
sorry, I'm not trying to shut down that line of reasoning. I just don't know the answer. I think it's really important to always be infusing new blood, new ideas, whatever, and changing things up a little bit. I told you that I played a game the other night, right? I told you that I was like cloud mining around Venus or something like that, right? And we were playing this wildly complex game, and the guys that taught me how to play this game believed that the winning strategy was to spend years of game time building a massive rocket that would go to the stars, right? And me, I was like flying a tin can powered on Mentos and Diet Coke, right? Okay, and I got
volatile.
And I was out there flying. I was flying a shoebox, and it was awesome. And they were like, "How is it that you're beating us in this game?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just following a strategy that I cooked up on my own. I'm not trying to beat you. I'm just doing this crazy idea. And they're like, that's the craziest thing we've ever heard of. And you smoked us, right?
That's awesome.
And I didn't set out to smoke anybody. I was just like, this seems like an easy way to play, right?
Yeah.
Because the game's so complicated, I'm just going to make it easy.
See, that's another reason that I love complicated games.
Yeah.
I'm really complicated anything, because then there's usually so many different ways that you can be different from the other people playing with you. Mm-hmm. And you could do a strategy that maybe no one's exactly thought of that thing.
Yeah.
So then it can be unique. And then each playthrough of things like that can be unique.
Right. Okay. So you asked me a question then, right? Like, does weird become the norm?
Right.
Right. And here's my advice. Here's another piece of advice maybe somebody gave this to me. I don't know.
See, you are my mentor, Alex.
I don't know. I don't know where this came from, but we talk about the business advantage of early adoption, right? Like, if there's a great idea out there and it hasn't quite caught fire yet, but you know that it's a great idea, you want to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll have, I don't want to say you'll have an advantage, but you will be better for adopting great ideas early. Okay, rather than waiting till they become sort of like mainstream, right?
Yeah,
and to have a good eye for like great ideas, that's really a good talent to have. But the flip side is just as important: early abandonment. Okay, like when an idea becomes it flips from being a superstar to being a cash cow, for example, right?
Yeah,
it's every idea, every business practice, everything that we do has a life cycle to it, right?
For sure.
And I like to get out of a business at the top, right? I don't want to like milk this thing. Like, maybe I could keep this business running for another 10 years and make, go from being a couple billion a year to being like maybe a couple $100 million before it finally tails off and I sell the business, right?
Right.
But I don't want to do that, right?
Because the effort on the downturn is going to be so high compared
I don't know. I mean, there's people out there that run very successful businesses that are just cash cows, right?
Yeah.
It's just not what I want to do. So, like, I'm coming back to answering your question, right? Like, for me, when something, like I told you earlier, when the job becomes stale or when I stop learning, I'm out. And getting out means abandoning. It means turning your back on what you've been doing and the people you've been working with and moving on, right? And a lot of people don't want to do that, right?
No, they don't, yeah.
And so the advice that I was given was learn to recognize when your business is peaking or when anything in your life is peaking and be prepared to walk away from it so that you don't get your heart broken, right? Now, that doesn't apply to love, okay, right? Love has no life cycle. It's there, man. Once you're locked in on love, that's it, man. It's the one thing that defies all exceptions, right? We could talk. Maybe we should do an episode on love. I don't know.
It is a key human emotion.
I'm a big believer.
And people do some wild stuff for it.
Just take 2 seconds.
Yeah, take 2 seconds.
And ask yourself, is this love or is this lost?
Right. That is very important. That might be the best piece of advice on here.
2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Take 2 seconds. That applies to a lot of things. But yeah, my mentor had, whoever it was that said this to me, said, be ready to walk away from it. And remember that when you walk away from it, you will walk away alone. So get comfortable with being alone. And that was also excellent advice, right?
Be comfortable with being alone.
Be comfortable. Yeah, because
Take 2 seconds.
take 2 seconds.
Be
right?
weird.
Yeah, brush your teeth.
Brush your teeth.
Don't start smoking.
Don't eat yellow snow.
That's great advice. I can't top it on that one. I mean, let's abandon this episode.
I think
right?
that's the
because we
first-
just peaked.
We just peaked. Yeah, we got to get out.
All right.
I think that might be the first piece of advice ever. Don't eat yellow snow. As old as mankind.
And my father would say, if I need to tell you that, boy, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, Alex, I feel like we did it again.
Hey, Dan, we always do it.
We went straight to the top.
Because it's always time to win.
Time to win, baby.
Hey, thanks for another awesome podcast.
No, thank you. You're the man.
Dan, I'm nobody.